today we're going to finish up our discussion on untapped potential. What we really are doing in this series of calls is looking at the benefit of paying attention to where high levels of tension are not being found. So we all know the universal truth about human behavior is that people pay attention to what?
To where they find their
To where
attention.
they find their tension. And so that tends to be stuff that is further upgrid than a lot of other stuff. Well, while we're paying attention to those things that are further upgrid than the things that are further downgrid, those things that are further downgrid get progressively less and less and less attention unless something comes along. And so I asked you guys to remind me of something last time we were together. I said, someone just tell me 2 words. You remember the 2 words? I said, please remind me of this. Anybody? Okay. Suicide clothesline. So does anybody remember that, or am I making all that up again? Am I
What is
imagining things
that?
again? A suicide clothesline. Now, a suicide clothesline goes back to an individual's change grid, but it can also occur at the group level, organizational level, societal level, perhaps. So it's when a massive amount of activities end up accumulating downgrid. So all
Hmm.
these activities have benefit to them. They need to be done. You can certainly do them, but because you have so many things that are further up grid and also perhaps a bit further out grid, these things just end up not getting done. So first, I'll tell you where the name suicide clothesline actually came from. I do believe I coined the term, so I got to tell you my definition of it. But how many of you are old enough to remember the days when people routinely hung their wet laundry outside to dry on the lines?
Oh
Absolutely.
yes,
Okay, yep, yep,
yes.
yep, yep. And I'm sure plenty of people still do it. The clothes do smell fresher. All those things are certainly true. Well, one of my jobs when I was a kid is I had to go and put the clothes up on the clothesline. And I knew that the more of these wet clothes I hung up on that line, the more that weight would pull down on the line. And early on, I didn't realize that it was possible to tighten the clothesline. And so if I wasn't really careful, what would end up happening is that those clothes are going to end up, because of gravity, getting closer and closer and closer to the ground until one of them, usually it was sheets, actually touched the ground. And when that happened, my mom said, I'm going to kill you. so, so I knew that allowing these clothes to, or the sheets usually, to touch that ground was the equivalent of me committing suicide. And so this is how it all came to be. That's where the metaphor came from. Don't put so much weight on the line that it ends up pulling you further and further and further close to that ground where death and demise and terrible things are going to occur. So let's apply this now to a bit of a change grid. When we start putting or allowing or whenever it just kind of circumstantially happens that an activity ends up slipping down grid, I want you to think of that activity as having some weight and you're hanging it on the line. And it's fine. You got 1, 2, 3, a handful of things hanging on the line. It's no big deal. But as we start to put more and more things in this downgrid area, the weight on the line becomes greater. Now, another thing that would happen if it wasn't for friction in the world of real laundry is things could slide together. And so, and I think that definitely happens when it comes to activities. They don't necessarily remain distinctive activities. They suddenly become a collection of, or a clump of, or a bundle of unfinished tasks. And
Mhm.
we even stop looking at them as being the distinct activities that are members of that kind of lump. It's now just one gigantic lump of stuff that I have to get done. So as it pulls to the center of the line, that drop even further and further and further downgrade becomes more accelerated, if you will. And of course, we keep putting more and more stuff on that line. Yesterday, I was reading a change grid of someone who's brand new to our work, and he put together an activity list of 16 activities, and they are scattered hither and yon. And I was reading his change grid, and several times I had to repeat to him, never forget that a change grid is nothing more than a snapshot of a subset of all the activities that are actually happening in your life. So remember that the change grid does not exist, the real change grid does not exist on a piece of paper. It does not exist on the screen in front of you. It does not exist in the ways that we tend to play with. The real change grid is where? Where's the real change grid? It's
In
in
your
your
brain.
head. It's in your brain. It's in your head. And how many activities are on that change grid?
Many.
Hundreds,
Infinite.
maybe. Who knows? Because it's everything that's going on in all areas of your life simultaneously. So you are a walking change grid. When we do something that is as contrived, if you will, as saying, hey, create an activity list, I'm just looking at a tiny subset of what's really going on in your world. So who knows? I mean, on his change grid, he had 3 or 4 activities that were floating down grid. And I said, yeah, but they might be joined by 300 or 400 other things that are going on in your life. And sooner or later, it just becomes a gigantic wad of unfinished activities. So can you guys all relate to this? Yeah.
Yes.
Now imagine, now I'll need to throw one more thing in as a reminder. Definitive change occurs only 2 places on the change grid. Where on the change grid does definitive change occur? 2 general areas. What kinds of changes occur?
Trash goes upstairs.
Outgrid.
Outgrid and to
Yeah.
what Dragon was saying,
Upgrid.
upgrid. We've got upgrid changes, we've got outgrid changes. What is the distinction between upgrid changes and outgrid changes? What makes these different? Anyone remember?
Your upgrid change is caused by external events, and your outgrid change is your own internal momentum.
Exactly. And so upgrade changes tend to be triggered by something outside of you happening. What kinds of things outside of you might drive you to the point of actually making a change? Give me a laundry list of what kind of external stimulants might actually prompt you to change.
Going broke, losing a job.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Deadlines,
Yeah.
harsh realities of life, going to the
Scheduling.
refrigerator and seeing that it doesn't have what you want or need. I mean, something outside of you is coming along. And by the way, one of the biggest sources of external stimulants are other people who are
Mm,
imposing their agendas on you. And
mhm,
so you might be very, very happy being downgraded about whatever, but there could be somebody else in your life who is not so happy to see these activities be down grid and don't hesitate to pester you about it. And so
mhm,
something is happening outside of you that is raising your level of tension, raising. Sooner or later, you're going to hit a threshold. Hopefully, it's not going to escalate all the way up into stress before you finally do it. But bottom line, upgrade changes most definitely occur. They tend to be driven by external factors. Okay. Now, as Kathy pointed out, outgrade changes are actually also very possible, but these are driven by internal factors. Tell me some of the internal stimulants that might give rise to you making an outgrid change.
Restlessness, the need to grow, the
The need to
boredom,
grow. Mm-hmm. Yep,
um,
yep, yep. Mm-hmm.
wanting to do more,
Mm-hmm. Yep,
wanting to achieve something
yep.
different.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have desire could be driving it. It's all about these
mhm,
internal sorts of things. I want something to be different. I'm choosing something to be different. And so if we look at the engagement rings, if we just follow track along, well, here they are. Lo and behold, the engagement rings are right here. So we go from intention to, or rather from awareness to intention to engagement to execution. These are all traveling along the heart line as we move through the outgrid quadrant. Just don't end up in the danger zone, and all is well. All is well. Um, and so I think that that's what it is. The big deal for me is that outgrid change is driven by choice. So you have made a
Mm.
conscious decision that this is something you want, and whatever's motivating you to do it could be very interesting to explore, but maybe it's some purpose, it's some mission, it's something that just inside of you is saying, this is essential to me as the human that I am, to go out there and do this work or make this accomplishment or whatever. It could also be slightly external as well, because competition lives out grid. Well, there is no competition. I mean, you can say you're competing against yourself and like golf or whatever. Okay, fine. But most competition involves another party. And usually that other party is also in power. And now you guys have kind of like a mutual test that's going on. Maybe it's a physical test, maybe it's a mental test, maybe it's a who's going to get the deal, who's going to, come up with a solution that's going to give us the prize or whatever it can be. And so there could also be a little bit of competition energy going on out there as well. Lots of other things as well, but do you guys feel the difference between outgrid changes and upgrid changes? Yeah.
Yes.
In your work as coaches and consultants and human development professionals of every variety, would you think that there is, that it's the quiz question, so think before throwing something out. Is there more opportunity, upgrid changes or outgrid changes for you as a provider of services? And second question is, in the long run, do you think it's better for someone to fill their life with changes that they are driving or waiting for outside factors? What do you think? Answer either or both of those questions.
First of all, as a coach, I want to be working with somebody who's driven by their own desire for change.
Mhm, mhm.
Generally, although that doesn't happen very often, that's not
Yeah,
always the case, but
yeah,
that's the preferred because there's more creativity possible there.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Let me just add to that, that what very often happens is, or I'll do this by way of a question. How often does something upgrid happen in an individual's life that then prompts them to reach out to coaching as a way to resolve it? So are we more likely to find people in power actively looking for a coach? Or are we more likely to find someone who's encountered some upgrade situation who is now considering coaching as one of the ways they could deal with that upgrade issue? So what do you think is generally prompting someone to go hunting for a coach?
Past dimension.
Something outside, something upgrade?
Upstairs, more upgrade.
Yeah, something more upgrade is doing. Now, to Kathy's point, I'm going to believe, you guys can tell me, that you're going to do your best within that very first conversation to let this individual know that they have inside of themselves the vast majority of what is going to be necessary for them to take care of any issue they happen to be facing. So yeah, you might need to help them find a resource or whatever, or to keep it in the coaching modality, help them find those resources for themselves. But nevertheless, I think that upgrade issues are often what are the seeds that lead someone to explore a relationship with human development. Now, if someone already has a natural leaning towards personal growth and development, they may very much see that having a personal coach is simply part of that logical process of moving that, or taking it out of the world of coaching. Maybe you need to have a sensei. Maybe you need to have someone who's going to
Hmm.
become your guide as you are learning how to meditate or whatever the case may be. But that's a very different energy than someone saying like, oops, I've hit a roadblock. I don't know what to do. Let me go and find a trainer or a coach or a consultant or a therapist who can help me get past that. Um,
Hmm.
and then again, generally trainers, coaches, human development professionals in general would much rather move someone into that outgrid mindset where they can decide to go and do whatever it is that they really want to go and do. Okay, so far, is this a good review? Do these kinds of reviews help you guys, or?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Because again, to me, life is explained on the change grid. So any puzzle we are looking at about life, we should be able to look at the change grid and it should be useful to us. I'm not suggesting it's going to instantly reveal the grand answer, but at least it should be useful in supporting that pursuit. Now, going back to the suicide clothesline, people would much rather put their energy into 2 out of these 4 quadrants. So where do you think your energy is most likely to go, and why? So it might just be a variation, but tell me, where do you think people would rather put their energy? If you could fill your day in any way you want, would you rather fill it with a bunch of up-grid stuff that needs to be dealt with, out-grid stuff that needs to be dealt with, in-grid stuff or down-grid stuff? Which is your preference?
I tend to live in the out grid.
Yeah,
I
because
said that earlier. I'm like, I think I'm just wired with a
yeah,
bias for action. Like I'm on the go until it's literally time for me to wind down. Like after 8 p.m., I start to turn into a pumpkin.
there you go. I'd
Maybe
love
a
to see a
little.
picture of Brian as a pumpkin. Someone with some real Photoshop skills needs to do that. So,
I just want to add. I'm also definitely more outgrid, but then to keep some sort of balance, to be honest, don't mind sometimes to be also downgrid.
yeah, well, right. And so, because downgrid is where we are going to relax.
Yeah.
Now, that's going to physically recharge us. I think that again, starting, next week, we can talk about why it's important for us to, after a very exhausting, tiring day, are we best served by focusing on downgrid remedies to that, or might we want to do a PowerPoint remedy for that as well?
Yeah. Well, to
So
Dragon's point, I probably vacillate between the two because I am, I wouldn't say a master, but I'm quite aware of managing physical, mental, intellectual, emotional energy throughout the day. So I'm always looking at ultradian rhythms, and I'm very specific how I set up activities, what
mhm,
I eat, when I eat it. So
yeah,
those are
yeah,
things I learned as an athlete. Like we would load up on the carbs before a game, a
mhm,
couple of hours before a game.
yep.
I don't eat anything like heavy
No, but you need
when it's
need the
time to
glycogen.
day.
Yep, yep,
Exactly. So all of that is part of my day, and I've been doing that for probably 30 years. So I probably vacillate between the two
yeah.
of down grid and out grid.
Right. And
Because
so, obviously we would all prefer to spend our time working on out-grid sorts of things because these are our choices. These are our goals, our interests, our projects, our whatever the case may be. We are doing anything out-grid intentionally. It's not being imposed upon us. We are freely choosing to do it. Now, if we aren't doing that, then what might, in fact, we'll do it this way, what might pull us away from doing these out-grid sorts of activities? What might interrupt your precious day of planning for getting all of the things you love most done?
other
Oh,
people drama.
Well, other people's drama. Why do I think there's a story there you could share? So interesting that you phrased it that way. Well, the answer I was going for was something up-grid. So, you know,
Well, I often get calls. One of my brothers and I, since we're all physicians, we often get calls from family member or someone going through something. So sometimes we have all learned that we just have to tell them, go to your physician, right? Because they disrupt the day, and then they want to, talk it out like fully, completely. Although we kind of
yeah,
direct them in the right direction,
yeah.
and then a quick conversation turn into 2 or 3 hours.
What's one of your brother's names?
They're twins, Keith and Kevin.
You should just say to everyone who calls you, "Oh, Kevin specializes in that." Just,
I feel like I need to start doing the Diane Bufflin technique a lot
yeah,
more.
right.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't
Isn't
that
that
interesting?
interesting to just
Yes.
everything they say? Because
Yeah,
this starts to happen frequently.
I'm sure.
Like particularly in the pandemic, it was happening a lot. And I just had to tell my mom that I can't talk to any of them anymore.
Yeah, well, but what's the point of having a family of doctors if you can't turn to them anytime and every time you have a boo-boo? So, I mean, come on, come on. Okay, so back to all this. We would rather spend our time doing things that are out-grid, but the harsh reality of life often introduces up-grid things that need to be dealt with. And it could be something as simple as like this morning I had my little plan and then I realized yesterday it was 100 degrees. Today it's going to hit 100 degrees. I got to get out front and water some of the things, plants that we have in pots and things like that. So that was an upgrade thing. It demanded the attention. So I went out there and I did what I needed to do so I can get back to whatever it is I'd really rather be doing. So my point is that we spend our time and energy on outgrid things and upgrade things. If we'd rather spend it on outgrid, but when upgrade stuff happens, it's going to get our attention because that's the rule, right? People pay attention to where they find their tension. So if something suddenly happens and you have to be upgraded, for example, was Chris on the call? Yeah, Chris, you survived the tornado. So he can unmute depending on where he is, but Chris is in the Atlanta area. Yeah, go ahead, Chris. So here he is. We were going to be chatting about whatever, or maybe I was talking to Tim. Was I talking to you or Tim?
Could have been Tim.
Yeah, well, you guys are both in Atlanta, but he was going like there's a tornado that's touching down in Atlanta. This is hardly the time for him to have our scheduled training call or coaching call. So where were you when the tornado touched down?
I was training a class. The tornado didn't touch down near where I live. I think it was closer to where Tim was. I was enjoying the rainfall, actually.
Yeah. Well, it hit national news. So
I see.
Yeah, because it got darn close to, well, those of you who haven't visited Atlanta, it would not be fair to say that Atlanta has a downtown. Atlanta has multiple downtown areas.
True.
And so they kept saying like, and it's threatening downtown. I kept going like, which one? So, where is it? Okay, anywho, so my point is that you could be busy doing your class and suddenly the tornado sirens go off. I do believe you're going to pay attention to that.
Absolutely.
So, does this building have a basement or what? So, yeah. Okay.
What about areas where you normalize that? I imagine the impact of that won't be the same for everyone. Because I think about what's that tornado alleys at Texas, Oklahoma?
Oh, it's all across the center band of the U.S., all the way from the Carolinas, clear across Texas, Oklahoma. Probably until it would hit the mountain range.
Right. So they probably would be like normalized to that kind of thing. But like if I were out there and heard like some siren or something for the first time, that probably would throw me off center like rapidly. Then try to get back might be a little bit difficult. Whereas for them who hear it all the time, they can calm down a little bit more easily, perhaps, I guess, when it's normalized.
I'll take it a step further. Linda and I are from Michigan, and so tornadoes are commonplace in Michigan. And so after years of living in a tornado-prone area, you hear about a tornado, and for whatever reason, we go outside to look for it. So we don't go down to the basement, which is what you're supposed to do. And most homes in Michigan actually have basements or storm cellars or something like that. Now we go outside. What's happening? What's happening? And what about all these crazy storm chasers who are actually driving toward the tornado? So different people have different levels of sensitivity based on the exposure they've had to it. But I promise you, most people who have actually been threatened by or experienced a tornado aren't going to do that again. So yeah.
AT, but you know what is interesting, because my class, the people that's in my class are spread out throughout the metropolitan Atlanta area. So so everybody's experiencing when that tornado touched down differently. Like majority of the people were in the suburban areas where tornadoes don't usually frequent, but we had two people that were. So they kept talking about how dark the skies were, how heavy the rain was coming down. So, you just kind of have to, as the facilitator, go into tension management mode,
That's right.
and and reprioritize things for them. If they feel unsafe, don't feel like you have to stay on this class.
No, pay
Please
attention to your
go
tension.
find
Go to
go find a
safety.
bathroom somewhere. Go to lower
Right?
level.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, Dragon, do you have tornadoes in the Netherlands?
No, no, not really.
No, no.
No.
Well, yeah. Well, there you go. They're very real here, and they're quite well. They can be quite terrifying, quite destructive. One interesting thing that happens here in the desert is we have these things called dust devils or dirt devils. So it's a tiny little tornado. And in many ways, they look kind of cute, and you can see them out in the distance, and they just whip up a bunch of sand and they're spinning around or whatever. The challenge with them is that they can drop out of the sky, out of a clear sky, without any warning. And so we've actually had dust devils come through our community, our street, and we had an umbrella, a patio umbrella kind of a thing. It lifted the umbrella and tossed it a couple of houses down, but you would look at it and kind of go like, oh, that can't possibly cause any trouble at all. But yeah, little mini tornadoes happen out here all the time. Yeah. Okay. So now this is a very long answer to the question about the suicide clothesline. The point is that because you're so focused on doing your outgrid stuff and you're forced to do the things that happen that are upgrid, by the end of the day, there is a greater and greater accumulation of things that are downgrid that just didn't get done. And it's not like they go downgrid and you forget about them. They go downgrid and they go to the back burner of the mind, but you're constantly being pestered or reminded, oh my gosh, I still have to do this, this, and this, and this, and X isn't getting done. And you see the stuff piling up, and you look at your email and go like, I've got 740 emails in my email box, and all this stuff. There's plenty of reminders that all this downgrade stuff exists. So how do you go about taking care of that? Again, this goes back to this idea about untapped potential, or why it's important to periodically pay attention to where your tension isn't. So what should we do? What do you guys do when you have an accumulation of things downgrid? So how do you make sure these don't get totally neglected? Thoughts?
I
Okay.
think Chris offered a word in terms of this idea of reprioritizing things. As I know, like when I talk to patients, a lot of times with these clinical investigations, I'm always after trying to get to the narrative behind the diagnosis, like what's underneath it, so I can understand how they're experiencing it. And I think for me, when things don't get done, that's what I have to revisit in terms of actually, why am I doing this to start with? Like, what is the real value of it? And can I assess the potential value in terms of importance now, as opposed to if it's already on the back burner and I'm getting along, then maybe it's something that I don't actually need. And so this whole idea of reprioritizing things become important for me.
I like the idea about reprioritizing. So, Chris, if that was something that you put forth on one of our calls, I'm curious to know what preceded the decision to reprioritize. Because again, remember, something has to have made you aware of all the stuff that was downgrid,
You
and that
need to first
awareness led to an intention. Yes, go ahead, Dragon.
I think
Oh,
you
by the
need
way,
first
Dragon,
to,
is it, we say Dragon because when we look at your name, that's how we
I
would,
know.
is it
I
Dragon,
know.
Dragon? What are we?
No, no, don't worry. I mean, when I lived in London, England, they called me Dragon, the breathing
Yeah,
fire
that's
thing.
what when we see that, we go, well, that's Dragon.
No, in my language is dragon, but it doesn't matter.
Dragon.
Dragon. I'm dragon. Yeah,
Okay.
but no. But what I want to say is, I think first you reevaluate, and then you can reprioritize. I have an interesting, maybe just quickly a short story. When I was practicing nearly 3 hours a day, and then some karate, and somebody comes to me and complains every day, complains how I'm much better than he is, and he wants to do it. And I ask him, "What do you do every day?" And he says, "I do this and this." Are you enjoying yourself? Yes. So I said, quit moaning. Why are you complaining? You're happy. You're doing what you want to do. So do it. If you really wanted to do what I do, you'd be doing it. So
Right.
sometimes, so my point is sometimes we badger ourselves with imagined things. It's
Mhm,
interesting.
mhm, mhm. And any thoughts about why we do that?
Curiosity.
Okay, tell us about that. Why do you think curiosity is about us questioning why,
I don't know.
I could,
I've been going back listening to the videos that the series that you did on curiosity,
mhm,
because the more research I've been doing on curiosity, it seems to me like it's a precursor to a lot of activities. Like
mhm,
even when we just talked about awareness, I think my curiosity of their well-being creates a heightened sense of awareness. So in a weather condition, and I'm so curious to make sure to so curious about their safety that it puts it in a high level awareness into me, which creates a reprioritization of this training class. Like, hey, let's just
mhm,
end this
mhm,
and we can
mhm.
revisit this. I don't know, because something clicked in me with curiosity that I just think it's a precursor to many of the things that we experience.
Interestingly enough, someone after those calls reached out to me and said that they thought that what curiosity really is the transition between awareness and intention.
Hmm. Yep.
That, you can be fully aware of something and it can just flow right through, going back to mindfulness. But the moment you
Mhm.
go, that got my attention now. I'm curious. I'm curious. Well, that curiosity is going to lead you to do what? And the big answer to the what is something. So there's an intention of some sort that's going to be there. So investigate it further, whatever that the shape that curiosity is
Yeah,
actually going to end up taking.
I still think it could be a precursor to even before awareness and not in between awareness,
Mhm.
but even before awareness.
And
Because
s-
something could be in you could be curious about something, like curiosity could be sparked before it's in your awareness.
But
right. So
that's
let's,
interesting. But can you be curious about something if you're not aware of it?
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it, like my curiosity about something puts it in my awareness? Like if there's a door at the end of a hallway, right?
yeah, but
I
you're
could be,
aware that there's a door at the end of the
Yeah, it
hallway.
strengthens your awareness. Maybe
yeah,
that way. Yeah.
I don't, I think it's situational then, because I don't
Yeah.
think not all awareness. Um,
Well, how about this? If I said not all awareness is conscious.
huh.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah,
could
see,
be,
okay, yeah.
yeah, there could be some things that you are detecting. I'm sure there's infinite things we are all detecting every moment that's
Hmm.
happening under our consciousness. Um, Maybe that's then you go, well, wait, that is what actually made me pay closer attention to something or made me move it from an unconscious awareness to a conscious awareness.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because is it
I
fair
like
for me
that.
to say that even a threat is a form of is associated with curiosity, or curiosity could also be associated with a threat in your environment?
Right.
So a
Yeah.
curiosity doesn't necessarily have to be something that is all pleasant and happy and all that kind of stuff. Maybe because I'm curious, I hear the snap, the sound behind me. I'm curious to know what caused that because it could be a threat to me. Maybe that's what's that curiosity is involved. Which,
Yeah.
by the
A big
way,
part of it is attention, because you got to remember from the way our bodies is designed and the way the brain works, we have attentional faculties that are always picking up things in the environment,
mhm,
whether we're aware of it or not.
Mm,
yeah, yep, yep,
So a
yep.
lot of times, by the time we are aware of it, we get a sensation in the body, and that's this top-down, bottom-up approach that the brain uses for communication. So we experience the world through our five senses. That's bottom up. So
Yeah,
if you think about it, it has to go up the brainstem, literally through the midbrain, where all the hypothalamus and all these areas that are connected to what's called the autonomic nervous system. So it
yeah,
happens automatically. It doesn't ask for your permission.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So these
And
things, again, are always taking place. And so a lot of times these things that pique our interest that's where the curiosity comes in terms of, wow, I can investigate this a little bit further.
So
So we go deeper into the awareness.
what's the neurotransmitters that are involved in curiosity?
Dopamine.
The, you
Dopamine?
get some dopamine, you get some acetylcholine, because acetylcholine puts like the spotlight on things. Like when you're learning
Mm.
something, the novelty, that'll be the spotlight on it, right? And then if
Mhm.
you use the dopamine to go further in terms of this curiosity and create some small wins, you'll want more of it, and so you'll continue down that path in terms of momentum.
Yeah, yep, yep, yep.
AT,
It's, yeah.
I was reading in Cracking the Curiosity Code, they said something interesting that relates to tension management, because they said control blocks curiosity and creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I found that to be interesting because of that blocking mechanism that everybody wants. Like people are not resistant to change, they're resistant to losing control, but the more control you get can stifle your growth
Well,
and
absolutely, because the
opportunities.
higher my level of control, the further what direction am I going to move on the change grid. The greater my perceived level of control, the more downgrade I'm going to go.
Down. Yeah.
Mhm.
Even if it ends up being an assumption of control and power apathy, or perhaps a continued assumption of control, but ultimately maybe an illusion of control down in apathy. I still going to think like I've got tremendous levels of control. See, because I got to go back to the curiosity thing, talk about this control thing. To me, curiosity is about paying attention to something.
Mm-hmm.
So curiosity and attention go together. We
Mm-hmm.
pay attention to where we find our tension. We're curious about the things that cause us tension. And we're not all that curious about things that we don't have any tension about, unless someone comes along and says, as an assignment, I'd like you to be curious about why you don't have any tension about something, you know? So what are the consequences? What's the cost of all that? Because it's not going to happen naturally. Um, so it all goes together. So I'm curious about something because I don't understand it. I don't have the full picture. I don't have it fully leveraged,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And hopefully that curiosity is going to lead me to a greater level of control.
Mm-hmm.
That's so I think that all fits in. So curiosity and attention might be almost synonyms in what we're looking at here.
Yes, and I
Yeah.
was curious to see what Merriam-Webster says, and a desire to know or inquisitive interest in something. So, like you say,
Mhm.
see, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
correlates
yeah.
to that.
Yeah. It's a wisdom to me that starts not with the knowledge, but with understanding, because the knowledge become biased. And if you look at
Mhm.
many of the spiritual kinds of languaging, it always starts with understanding that leads to some kind of instruction that furthers the knowledge, and in that order. Because when you start with the knowledge, you're going to be biased. And my sensei used to always say, in martial arts, it's impossible to learn and resist at the same time. So if you want to learn something, you have to open yourself up for it. But
Mhm,
the
mhm.
practice of resistance is going to do the exact opposite. So that idea of thinking that I'm going to control everything, that's why it
Yeah,
blocks that opportunity to learn.
right. And
Yeah.
certainly we say things like a little bit of knowledge is a very dangerous thing. So, yeah, yeah. Okay, so to finish this off, we really didn't get to the real subject. Which I'm okay, which by the way, I'm okay with that. I find this absolutely fascinating. But this idea about dealing with things that are deep down in apathy. In order to deal with this stuff, again, paying attention where your attention isn't, it is important that we put on our calendar, if you will, or we put it as part of our routine that periodically we are going to set aside all of our outgrid desires. I know I'm using a different layer of the change group, but you guys are all fluent enough to know what I'm pointing to here is outgrid. Set aside our outgrid focus and hopefully not have to deal with the stuff that is upgrid, to just say today I'm going to have what I've referred to as the great downgrid cleanup day. And
Mhm.
so maybe you don't need a great downgrade cleanup day. Maybe you need to have on a weekly basis the great downgrade cleanup morning or the great downgrade cleanup day each day. But periodically, you need to say, there is stuff downgrade that could be very valuable to me. Remember, we say that very often the solution to the upgrade problems or the real enhancement we need for outgrid accomplishment can be found in the untapped potential of these downgrade activities. So
Mm.
I'm doing this inventory for multiple reasons. Number one, going back to what Brian said, maybe I don't need to do it at all, in which case get it off my grid, just throw it away altogether. Maybe it's something I can delegate to somebody else, in which case let's do that. Maybe it's something that I simply need to say, no, I own that. I've just got to go and do it. And you just go into it. Like, for example, the beginning of every month, I go across the street. We have a neighbor who is a snowbird, so he's not here year round. And I go into his house, and all I do is check his giant water buckets. When you live in the desert, you can't leave your house without a source of humidity on the inside. And so we have to do something to do that. So there's these gigantic, those Home Depot 5-gallon bucket things. People will put 6, 7, 8 of these scattered around their house filled with water. And then once a month, you just go have someone go in to make sure there's still water in them. Well, I haven't gone yet. Today is what, the 6th, the 7th? What day is it? So I got to go do that. I'm downgrade about that. But I know that I need to do it. I've committed to doing it. It's not difficult. It won't even take me 10 minutes to do it. But I have to make sure that I have that as something that I'm reminded to go and do, the great downgrade cleanup day. Now, sometimes we say in order for you to do that, you might even say on that day, I can't do the outgrid stuff that I really want to do until I get some downgrade stuff taken care of. So you might need to play a little bit of a game with
Mhm.
buying yourself the right to do what you really want to be doing.
Mhm.
You got to take care of that. There are other things that are downgrade that are okay downgrade. So for example, if you're doing something on purpose to relax, it really should plot downgrade. And if having family time is downgrid and you routinely do it every night anyway, I don't care that it's downgrid. It's part of your routine. It's more those activities that end up causing clutter that ultimately, if you don't do it, it's going to be the equivalent of laundry on that clothesline that's going to end up touching the ground and there's going to be hell to pay for it. So
Mhm.
we can't ignore these things that are downgrade. Okay, I've said enough about that, but you guys get the idea? We have
Yes.
to periodically pay attention where our attention isn't, or we could have real trouble to pay for that for that ignoring these kinds of things. Okay, further thoughts on that?
I like that. Take an audit of sorts, right?
Yeah,
Of
and yeah, and the key thing there is that unless we do something formal to make it part of our routine, these things can be delayed indefinitely. And so
mm,
that's why I was curious to know, like when you were saying, Chris said, well, you have to go in and do reprioritizing or whatever. What happened before reprioritizing? The answer is you have to have decided that you're going to reprioritize. At some point, you have to have said, I'm going to take some time right now and I'm going to do this. Well, was that part, Chris isn't on the call anymore, but was that part of his normal routine? Is that part of his weekly schedule? Is that on your to-do list? How did you get triggered to actually do pay attention to these things that are downgrid and ultimately take care
mm.
of the great downgrid, cleanup day?
And so something typically triggers it anyway, right? So like for me, like I'm a minimalist, and
Mhm.
when papers from all this research and stuff starts to pile up, I'm like, hell no, this has to go. I can't I can't do it. So although I've been putting it off, because I'm like have to get into other research and do some writing and do all this stuff, I can't stand to see piles. Like it just literally gets underneath my skin.
Yeah, 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 yep, yep. And that's it. So something has to trigger it, because if those piles were behind a cabinet door sitting on a shelf somewhere, it would
Yeah, I
be out of
wouldn't
your
see
aware.
it.
You wouldn't notice it.
Exactly.
It wouldn't bother you.
Exactly.
And so again, you need to have whatever that trigger is. And maybe that trigger is for you. You say, I don't put unfinished paperwork in a drawer or behind a door. I leave it right out where I have no choice but to see it. Otherwise, it'll never get done. Maybe that's one of your ways of keeping yourself aware enough to periodically pay attention to whatever it is that's going on down grid. Um, but that's the whole essence, the importance of paying attention to where your attention isn't. And again, you could be rewarded greatly by doing that, because there's a whole lot of assets sitting down grid here, lots of ability, lots of knowledge, skill, experience, resources that have been ignored so completely for so long that you may forget that you even have them. We talked about that on a prior call. Maybe there's some stuff down here while you're doing this cleanup that could be very useful to you when you get back to doing the things you really want to be doing, or it could be very instrumental in helping you resolve whatever these upgrade issues happen to
I
be.
think I think it's a great conversation. If I may just say something crossed my mind talking about this awareness and switching from one to the other. It's an analogy to what I've been talking to myself for years. My life philosophy is to be found in the yin yang, the yin yang
Mhm,
Mhm.
cycle. And my
mhm.
my idea is and wishes goal is always to be able to walk on that middle line, which is a sort of S, because
Yes.
then you're aware of both sides. You know them, you can use them if you want to, when you need to, and to choose what you need to pick out from, or to put your attention to. So
Mhm,
it
Mhm.
mhm, mhm.
sums up everything we've been talking about
Yeah,
today.
I love
Mhm.
that. And again, when we have our subject on, talking about being in the center of the change grid, meditation, et cetera, it might be very interesting for you to talk in detail about living on the edge of that yin yang diagram. Is there a name, by the way, for the yin yang altogether? We talk about yin
Well,
and yang, but what is it called? Hmm, I don't know.
I don't know.
I
But
don't
that's a
know.
skill. That would be a great thing to talk about because that's definitely a skill set. But I
It
just think
is.
about like imagine the what did you call the clothesline? Suicide clothesline,
Yeah.
all those activities down grid. For most people, I would imagine is unconscious. Like
Yep.
it says it could have been there for so long
Yep.
or whatever the case might be. So they're really not thinking about it or have that awareness of
Yeah.
until
Well,
something triggers it.
and it begins with something as conscious as saying, "I'll take care of that later."
Mm-hmm.
And then, in English, I don't know if there's a Dutch equivalent for this dragon, but we talk about something moving to the back burner of the stove.
yeah, I
So,
Mm-hmm.
get it.
yeah, and sometimes things fall off the stove altogether. It's not even on the stove anymore. And so that's the thing we're talking about, where it's kind of like it is so beyond my conscious awareness. I am now hypo aware. I'm deep down in apathy about it.
Well,
So it's still
an-
part of my reality, but not my conscious reality.
another word skips to my mind. It's procrastination, which where most of us, well, a lot of people are very good at
Mm-hmm.
procrastination.
Hmm.
But that's
Yeah.
also a nice
Yeah.
topic. Why we
Absolutely.
procrastinate.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're at the top of the hour. I do have one curiosity, Dragon. Since you're on the call, you might as well help us learn a new language. And today you used a word that I'm very curious to know. You described some of these people that are talking about meditation as being charlatans. And I'm wondering, what is the Dutch equivalent of charlatan?
Charlatan.
Oh, is that right? Is it the same word?
No, well, yeah. In Dutch, there are a lot of English words which are incorporated, and what they only do, which sometimes I laugh very often, they change the pronunciation,
Sure, yeah, yeah,
and then it
yeah.
seems like a Dutch word, which I don't mind. I mean, every language uses
Of course.
some English words, but they always adjust it to their own pronunciation. Then
Yeah, it's true.
for
It's
me,
true.
is English also nearly my own language because I lived as a kid in England, but so
Yeah,
it's a bit funny. But so I think it's charlatan. Yeah,
charlatan. Okay, there you go. Yeah, just curious.
of imposter that they use that also.
And is
Mhm.
imposter also a Dutch word pretty directly?
Well, yeah, probably not.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I know when I spent time in the Netherlands, I find Dutch rather straightforward to read.
Mhm.
So, because a lot of the words look very similar to what they would actually, mean in English. But to hear spoken Dutch is a totally different experience.
It
It's like,
Mhm.
is, yeah, it's something else. If you've never spoken German or something like that, the first time that I heard she was then my girlfriend, later my wife and now ex-wife, but the first time I heard her speak, I just couldn't keep it in me. I said, when are you going to spit it out? Because
yeah,
they use so much the goedendag.
yeah, yeah, right.
Goedendag is good day, yeah.
Goedendag,
The
yeah,
G is
right,
goedendag.
right. Cough it up
Oh,
already.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
funny.
Well, in fact, my very first client in the Netherlands was Han Gids. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the boy, when your client requires that sound, you best learn how to say it at least reasonably well. But Houten Kids, Golden Pages. Yeah. So there is. Okay. All right. So thanks everybody. We will pick up where we left off on Tuesday, and I will get this subject of being in the middle of the change grid, mindfulness, etc. Next in line for us. All right. So thanks everybody. Take care. Okay, bye
Okay,
for now.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.